Hey everybody, Pastor Hans here, and we are in day 5 of our 28-day challenge. We're challenging you to walk through the book of Acts, and here's why we're asking you to read through the book of Acts. It's the reason the book of Acts is actually my favorite book of the Bible, because Acts tells us what it means to be the church. It reminds us why the church was started some 2,000 years ago in the very first place. So today, we are in chapter 5, and if you have yet to kind of catch up or walk with us through this walk, stop now, go back to the first one, and catch up. We're in chapter 5. Pull out your Bibles, folks, because today I want to ask you a question, and it has to do with the church. When you think of the church, what are sort of the words or images that you use to describe what the church is? My guess is they are words, the words you would use are words that look back. You might use words like tradition or timeless. The church is unchanging. The church was created to preserve a tradition. Today, as we look at chapter 5, here's what I want to suggest. What if those were words that were never meant to be associated with the church? Hey, let's dive into chapter 5 of the book of Acts. Hey, it begins with a really weird story, and we're going to fly by this story. The first 11 verses of chapter 5, they introduce two characters, Ananias and Sapphira. And it's a weird story where these two, they sell some property, and they don't share the earnings with the Christian community. That Christian community, they held everything in common. They held back. Peter confronts them, and guess what? These two, this couple, they die. It's a weird story. But it reminds us, actually, that when it comes to our wealth, well, most of us are willing to exchange anything for wealth if we're really honest. Materialism runs deep within all of us. We exchange our family, our friends, our love, our reputation for wealth. And that wealth, well, it comes with a cost. And the church, this story was told to remind us that the church was meant to be an alternative community to that. Our materialism, it never has the last say. Well, what I really want to talk to you today about is the story that comes next. It gives us a window into the first church and what the first church was meant to be, what the church was meant to be in general. It starts with a story about the church. It was growing. There were healings, miracles. People were coming from all around to be a part of that first church. Now, as you can imagine, maybe the religious muckety-mucks of the day, the religious types, they were jealous. And so here's what they did. They threw the leaders of the church in jail. The story says they prayed to God and miraculously angels busted them out of jail. But then the religious types grabbed them again, threw them back in jail, and they were presented to the Sanhedrin, which was sort of a religious court. And as they were trying to figure out what to do with the leaders of this new church, a guy by the name of Gamaliel, he got up and he said some words that were really important. He persuaded the Sanhedrin as to how they should deal with these men. He said to that community, that Sanhedrin, he said, "Leave these men alone. Let them go. For if their purpose and activity is of human origin, it will fail. But if it is from God, you will not be able to stop these men. You will only find yourselves fighting against God." You see, what Gamaliel says is he basically says, if what they're doing is of man, it's going to die anyway. But if it is of God, just think, just maybe God is doing a new thing. Maybe God is innovating in our midst. Maybe God is working differently. Maybe God is doing something different to reach a new group of people. Maybe God is experiencing a new season among us. Maybe God is doing a new thing. As we read through the book of Acts, folks, if there's one thing I want you to remember, it's this. The church was meant to be a community of people where God can do new things, where God can do new things. Because here's the thing about the story of Jesus. The story of Jesus is always disrupting the status quo. It's always disrupting those rules that sort of confine us, the power brokers of our world, the cultural expectations we have. You see, that's what the story of Jesus always does. The church was meant to be a community where people do a new thing by God's hand. God can always do a new thing. Why? Because we have the church. The church was created. It was meant to be a place where God can do a new thing. So here's my question for you, especially for those of you that maybe struggle with change. Where do you see God doing a new thing in your life? Where do you see God doing a new thing in your church, in your community, and in our world? And secondly, here's a second one, and maybe a more challenging question. Where is God pushing you to change? Where is God wanting to do a new thing in you? Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.